Okay, we are live, so for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I will be your friendly Dungeon Muser this evening. I wanted to quickly hop on and do, or shoot a short State of the Union for our third quarter. We're finishing up or wrapping up the third quarter right now. There's about a month left. At the time of recording, it is September 1st, 2019. So I thought I would pump on and talk about what's happened in the third quarter and talk about what we've got planned for the final months of 2019 as well, too, because we have 4 more months. We're heading into the last third as we speak. Forgive me for looking away. I'm just making sure that we're actually streaming. And also for those who may have been waiting to join on to join this stream live, to my apologies. At the time of recording, I was out at the marching in the Pride Parade today, and I ended up being a lot more tired after that than I expected. So I napped a little longer than I expected. So I started this a little later than I expected. So first off, let me start by, since the time of our last State of the Union, we've seen a substantial number of new subscribers join the channel. So welcome everybody who has joined since June. The last State of the Union was in late May, so it has been about 4 months since we last kind of touched base. So I had recently been doing some thought about, how to, what I want to be running for the next little bit. And as is usually the case for these State of the Unions, I kind of like looking back and see what we've, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and kind of talk about how that has influenced what I have planned for the remaining parts of the year. I also want to talk about the Heroes Save Villages charity campaign that we run on the channel, because we've had a pretty amazing quarter. So I want to talk about that and the plans I have for that, and also to solicit some input from you folks, because I've got some ideas for what might be good for new rewards on the rewards page for the charity, but I definitely would like some input from that. But so first, let's talk about what has been going on. So on the channel, we have been in the last since June really of 2019, we've been running games regularly Monday or Wednesday nights, Friday nights, Saturday mornings, and Sunday mornings. And that's been, if you told me at the beginning of the year that I'd be running 4 games a week, and then cycling between different games as well, and then also mixing in one-shots, I likely would have said there's absolutely no way I could do that and not have that impact some other aspect of my life, like my job. But it's been a really good quarter, in terms of keeping dates. I've missed some sessions or had to cancel some sessions due to vacation in early June. And I had to miss one recently because I had a migraine. And normally, that's something I from where I live, we have these pressure changes, and I didn't grow up out here, so my body's just not used to those. So sometimes I get these, when we have substantial pressure changes, I end up with a migraine, and normally I can catch them and it doesn't affect things, or I can just drug myself to get through a 3-hour session. But unfortunately, this one, this one had other plans for me. So, but that's pretty good. I mean, an entire quarter where we really missed, only had one unintentional missing of a session. And then for the actual play sessions, I think we've only missed one when I was on vacation. And then during that time, we also had our annual gaming marathon, which was interesting. So I want to talk about that. But first, let's talk about the ongoing campaigns that we've had starting with the oldest 2 that we've got. This past weekend, I ran the 16th session for our ongoing Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game. This is a swords, sorcery, and weird fiction role-playing game designed by Jeff Chalanian and published by his company, Northwind Adventures. It is effectively if you're not familiar with it, it is effectively like a cleaned-up AD&D. It's an old-school Renaissance game, an OSR game. But it is... what it does is, in addition to having kind of the updated AD&D stuff or the streamlined AD&D rules, it also has a setting that gets rid of any of the Tolkien influences. It leans more heavily into some of the other influences behind Dungeons and Dragons, like Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith and H.P. Lovecraft, and as such, there's no elves or dwarves or whatnot. It's all humans in the Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game. And it's great. Like that game, the game itself is one of my absolute favorite role-playing games. I adore the game. I think it does exactly what it says on the tin. And that particular campaign, we've got about 7 players in it, and we almost always have full house or near full house for that campaign. It's been terrific. It is an open, it's a sandbox game where the primary, primarily what's been happening is the characters have been, it started with them washed up on the shores of this mysterious land that they were traveling. They're trying to get to this city called Tuleborg, and we're now about 42 hours into the campaign, and they still have yet to make it to Tuleborg. They've been having all these adventures as they travel across land. I've been making a great deal of use of the old AD&D Wilderness Survival Guide, which, regular viewers of the channel will know is one of my absolute favorite role-playing products. But I've also been adapting a bunch of other stuff for that particular game. I've been using Pathfinder's Ultimate Wilderness and some homebrew stuff, and then adapting it to work with the Ash rules. And it's been a really, really fun campaign. Like, I mean, when the characters do get to Tuleborg, there's still going to be tons of it. I mean, not still. There's so much more adventure waiting for them. But it's remarkable how much fun we've been having with just them wandering around, meeting people, getting in adventures, and then going on. It is an intentionally sandbox game where there are elements that are out there that the players can react with and then can kind of get involved with stories. And one of those that's happened so far is we had our first siege of a castle in that campaign, which was amazing. It was spread over 2 different sessions, and then they went back a second time. But the first siege was particularly crazy because it had like 34 characters on the board at one time because it's an old school game, it tends to play a lot faster. But I mean, it still remains as exciting and quite lethal too, in spite of me using these house rules for what I call points of astonishing fortune, which are kind of like hero points in other games. But that game's going great. Every 2 weeks we play that, and every 2 weeks I can't wait to play it. Every 2 weeks we finish up. I can't wait to the next session. Another really lovely thing about that particular game is it's giving me an opportunity to really explore some of the AD&D back library, because I've been slowly kind of filling holes over the last, since I've got back into old school games about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. I've been filling holes in my personal collection, and when I do that now with some of the AD&D first and second edition stuff, I can make use of all of that. I've been making use of the Oriental Adventures book as well. There's a really terrific random event table for days, months, years in that, and I love that thing. And that adds a little bit of the unexpected and the necessity for improvisation on my part. So it's proven to be a really great asset. I joke that campaign is the thing that makes the most use of my library, So that's great. And I mean, it's a welcome change from some of the other games we've been running lately, where it provides a much more old school feel to it. Magic is much more powerful at lower levels, but characters are a little more vulnerable. Random encounters are not necessarily balanced. It's all that kind of stuff. So it's great stuff. In addition, our Starfinder campaign. So, I didn't grab my Starfinder book. Starfinder, the science fantasy role-playing game published by Paizo. Starfinder, we play every second Saturday morning, not Wednesday morning. I have to work those mornings. So Saturday mornings we play that, and that campaign is likewise into about 14 or 15 sessions, and it's going really well. We played through the first module of the Against the Aeon Throne adventure path, but then in addition to that, I've also been throwing in some other stuff. Initially, what my plan was with that campaign was to first of all to find people who are interested in playing, just showing up every week or every 2 weeks and playing that game, and then seeing whether hi Amy, and then seeing whether I could learn the rules by sticking to a set module, to get a sense of what an appropriate challenge was, how the rules are supposed to run, how you can take advantage of how the world is presented in terms of how you use computers in this sci-fi setting and so forth. And my confidence has grown in my understanding of that game to the point where, right now we're in the middle of a kind of a flashback adventure that's going to take us a few sessions to play through. That is very, very much a kind of like sci-fi western thing that has some elements of the old Dark Sun setting from AD&D in it. I really, really, really enjoy that game as well. It's interesting, having run that for about 7 months before the Pathfinder 2nd Edition rulebook came out, and starting to run that game at the same time I'm running Starfinder. But I'll talk about that when I'll talk about Starfinder or Pathfinder, and then I'll kind of cycle back to that. But yeah, the Starfinder campaign has been ongoing. It's been great getting to know the guys who are playing the campaign. One of my players in that game is someone who I've gamed with since I was in grade 2. So it's it's an old someone who I've known for years and years. But the other 3 players in that are all people who I've just met through the course of setting up the campaign. And it's been really great getting to know those guys and seeing how they play differently, or how they approach problems differently from the people I played with. Regular viewers of the channel may know that in this, one of the things that has been a big intentional goal for me in 2019 was to really expand the pool of people I play with. Most often, for years and years, I just played with my friends, people I already knew, who I knew like role-playing games, and we'd play whatever I was going to run. But this particular year, I've intentionally tried to get myself out of, just playing with the same people, meet new people, and to really grow as a DM by running games for different people. And it's been fantastic. That campaign has been really great for that. It's been great getting to know those guys and becoming friends with those guys, and I'm looking forward to that campaign likewise going on and on and on. And the same thing with Ash, for that matter, too. Our Reavers of Tula campaign, the Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game, that likewise too. There's some guys that I knew through, the OSR community or whatnot, or I'd met in a game. But for the most, it's all people who I met, and likewise, it's been great getting to know those guys and becoming friends with those guys. Those are really the last standing members of the ongoing campaigns that I started when I was when I kicked off 2019. So, I'm choosing not to, for this particular year, to decide whether or not the length of not using the length of a campaign as the way of measuring its successor or not. Regular viewers of the channel may be aware of this already too, but my approach for this particular channel is not to just run a scripted campaign, right? There are plenty of other channels and plenty of other, both on YouTube and on Twitch, where you can go and you can get, people who have signed up to play a specific length of thing, and that's just not really what we do here. What we do is, if a campaign is not, has reached its natural conclusion, we might wrap it up officially, but more often than not, we're not going to, and the reason being is, campaigns die for a variety of reasons, and usually it's not because of lack of interest. It's usually because, or it's not because, it's a mix of different things. Lack of interest can be one thing when people just stop showing up, but that's fortunately not a problem I generally have. More often it's because there's a change of personal availability for people, so people can't play on certain days, so we have to find something else, and then that becomes the new thing we're running. And one of the things, when I get to talk about one of our ongoing campaigns, the Burmese game, that is a game that accommodates a flexible schedule for players in a way that is much better than a lot of other scripted games. Like my Ash game, the Starfinder game, those have the same players, same characters each week. Sometimes we're down 1 or 2 players, but for the most part, that's what we do. The other game, the major campaign I guess I'm running right now, where it's 2 nights a week, that one is an open table for our pool of players. So they come and go, which means that it's different people each time, and we need to have a game that is set up in such a way that people can come in and come out. So, for that particular type of campaign, there needs to be also a regular interest to keep that one going. So, I think at the last time the last State of the Union, I had talked about how the Burmese had ended. By that point, we weren't running Burmese anymore. We were doing something else on Wednesdays. And it's interesting that we've gone back to Burmese. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So I keep talking about Burmese. I'll quickly hold this up here. So this is if you are unfamiliar with the ongoing game we're streaming on the channel, Burmese is a mega dungeon published by a guy named Greg Gillespie. Greg Gillespie is a writer in the old school Renaissance community. He's also a professor, and Burmese Complete was sort of the final version of this mega dungeon that he had produced a couple of different times. He has 2 other mega dungeons that he's produced since this came out, one called Forbidden Caverns of Archaea, and a more recent one called Highfell. All of them are really, really awesome, but this is the original one, and this one really features a lot of undead, and it has one massive mega dungeon, and there's this creepy swamp you have to go through, so a lot of those things are things I love about D&D, and as such, it appeals to me in a... it appeals to me for a lot of my sensibilities. I love me some undead. What had happened last year is we started running Burmese Complete. Initially, we were running it with the Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest. That proved to be, the way I chose to run that was really fucking stupid. And it just did not suit either what we were trying to do with the story in Burmese, and it did not suit the rule set. So it became a very frustrating exercise where the rules didn't really work terribly well with the actual story we were telling. However, since that time, we switched over and we used briefly a game called Scarlet Heroes, which was published by a guy named Kevin Crawford, another writer in the OSR community. He has a bunch of different games, including Godbound, Revised Stars Without Number, and Scarlet Heroes, and there's one more I'm forgetting, which is called... I can't find it. There's Other Dust, which is this post-apocalyptic thing, and Silent Legions, which is a horror-based kind of game. Just bear with me one moment. I can hear someone's getting home and the dog's about to go crazy. So, we continued on our campaign for Burmese up to about 35 sessions. And then I also ran a one-shot with that using Robert Schwab's really cool Shadow of the Demon Lord game. And then we kind of ended that, and I don't remember why I don't remember what we switched off to after that, to be honest. I really should have looked at the list of videos and see what it was that took its place, but we just stopped playing that because people suddenly were not available, and we needed to make a change. Because I think it was primarily people weren't available, and I was kind of losing interest in that campaign too. So we, because when players aren't available to go, and I have to write other stuff, I tend to kind of, to decide to write my own stuff and then find people who will play that. And then this past 2 months ago, I guess, in August, July, maybe? I don't remember. I think it's maybe a month or so ago at the time of recording. That's when this came out, which is Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So Pathfinder 2nd Edition came out, and it was everything that I really enjoyed. While I found that the Pathfinder playtest did not fit very well with Barrowmaze, with the way I was running it, the game itself was phenomenal, and I was really looking forward to when the final product came out. And it turned out I enjoyed the final product even more than what the playtest was. They made some changes that I liked, and I have recorded a very long 2.5-hour video about my thoughts on Pathfinder, so, Pathfinder 2nd. So I won't talk about that any longer here, but suffice it to say that I was really, jazzed about taking this game out again. And when I was home in my hometown for our gaming marathon in June, all of my players were talking about the great memories they had playing Barrowmaze, and I've got some theories as to why that particular game kind of resonated with them, but it just really it lodged itself up there. So when Pathfinder 2nd came out, and I sort of think about what I was going to do with it, I thought, you know what, let's take another pass at Barrowmaze. But this time, I'm going to design things to suit not the skill set, the game mechanics, and that's what we've been doing. You may see that on the channel we've got hour and something video about designing stuff for the exploration mode, and I'm not going to go into any further depth about that in this particular video, but I'll include a link in the description of the video to that if you want to see how I put together the travel rules and exploration rules for my Barrowmaze game. But it's proven to be a really, really, really fun game. The game, or campaign, I should say. The game itself is terrific. I think Pathfinder 2nd is a really, really solid game, and I think that the Barrowmaze campaign itself is just a shit ton of fun because it's similar in a lot of the ways that I love the Ash game, in the sense that there's a sandbox and the players are exploring in it. It's very much like that here, where there is stuff going on in the Barrow Maze, both in the actual dungeon itself, but also in the town and the different factions that are there. And there's mysteries that the characters are unveiling, and there's threats that are, emerging or whatever. And it's been, we're at the point right now where we're actually getting everyone to create a second set of heroes, because we've got some heroes who are doing one thing and some heroes doing another. So we're going to have potentially two different groups of heroes that we might be switching between to as these characters are uncovering what's going on in the Barrow Maze, and then eventually going back, or in the setting for the Duchy, the Barrow Maze is a place called the Duchy of Eric, and in that setting they're finding things that will tie back to the Barrow Moor and then to the Barrow Maze dungeon as well. So yeah, so it's been really, really great. Like it's and one of the reasons why I find, as personally as a DM, those ongoing campaigns so enjoyable is because there's constantly a sense of surprise for me and a constant need to improvise, and that's incredibly fun. I love doing that stuff. For me, I really enjoy having to think on my feet and respond to what players are doing when unexpected stuff comes up, both story-wise and mechanic-wise. There's some of the sort of house rules that we have developed over the course of play. It's stuff where like players have decided to try something, and I've had to come up with something out of, pull an idea out of my ass, and it worked, it didn't work sometimes, and then we just kind of adapt from there. So it's a fun way of kind of like live play testing or beta testing our house rules for that particular game. The other fun thing is that there's constantly a rotating. It's a different group each time too, so there's always kind of there's an impetus on my part to come up with, okay, I know who I've got tonight, so how am I going to spin this stuff tonight? For tonight's session, I need to fill 4 hours, so what do we think could happen in this time? But I don't force it on the players. There's times where, like, they've been sent on missions to kick off the second attempt at the campaign. But yeah, we're into that. We've got the legwork done. We've got the initial kind of adventures done. So things are starting to go. Players are getting and their characters are getting invested back in the setting. And that campaign is going to be an ongoing thing. That's going to be our Wednesday, Fridays. And then sometimes we're going to be subbing out Fridays for something else. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, it's been really, that going back to that, both that game and that setting has been extremely exciting. And another reason it's been exciting is because of the player response. It's been very, very cool seeing how many players want to get back into that game and want to participate in that. And yeah, I mean, that is extremely gratifying as a DM. And what it means too is we get a chance to have some cross-pollination from some of our other games too. People who don't get a chance to play with each other in some of our other campaigns, they all get to kind of meet in this and then, play forward. So that's been a lot of fun. It's also, I think it's been fun hearing from a lot of the new subscribers who I think have been coming in to the channel because of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's been interesting meeting those folks as well and hearing their input and how they're engaging with the game, as we're kind of all learning together. At the time of recording, the game is very, very new. There is precisely 2 core rulebooks that are out for it right now, and that for me is a very, very exciting time for a role-playing game. When you see what the game becomes years down the road, and you see all the source books and whatnot, that's fine. Like that's a good point to be at too, because you get tons of material and whatnot. But at this point, it's the real. It's the closest you get to kind of unexplored territory with a role-playing game, and I really love that. So that's been a lot of fun as well. And I mentioned that Starfinder, has been a really terrific game for us, but it wasn't until I started running Pathfinder 2nd which has a different action economy from what Starfinder does. Starfinder owes its roots to Pathfinder 1st Edition, and the changes that were made to Starfinder are kind of a halfway point between. There's some things about Starfinder that are totally different that are not in Pathfinder 2nd, so it's not quite the 1.5 to 2, but there's a lot of stuff that's in there. And the action economy is one of those things that I kind of wish they had changed, because it is so fast at playing and it's so intuitive for players that I think when you go back to when you play them back to back, like I had a Friday session where I ran Pathfinder Second, and then I had a Saturday session where I ran Starfinder, and I was just thinking like, oh, I wish I really need to think about house ruling this to run it differently, because the Pathfinder action economy is much faster and more cinematic than what the Starfinder one is, and Starfinder should feel cinematic. It is on its own. It's a completely great game. Like, there's nothing wrong with that game whatsoever, and I didn't have any issues with it until I started running Pathfinder Second. So it's only the way it kind of sets up that way. And one of my players from my game too, in our Discord channel, we were talking about that today, and he said, he ran it back to back, Pathfinder 2, then Starfinder, and he's like, it seems a lot slower, and more fiddly when you run them back to back. So I'm going to think about making some changes to that, but fortunately, I mean, it wouldn't require an awful lot of work, but I certainly wouldn't be scrapping the campaign. I'm having far too much fun with those players and the characters that we've met with that, so that will be ongoing as well. In addition, on Saturdays and Sundays, the other two games we alternate. So on Saturdays, we alternate between Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, and then alternate Saturdays, we run a Pathfinder 2nd Edition campaign set in the Principalities of Galantry. Now, those who are younger players will not know, or may not know at least, what this is. This is a source book that came out in, I believe, 1987. And this is one of the gazetteers for the known world setting, which later was called Mystara. And that was for the basic D&D set, the basic, it was the BECMI set, technically, the basic expert companion master immortal set of rules that I think Bruce Hurd put together. I don't think that's right. I think someone's going to, Frank Menser, I think. Maybe Menser, I think, is the one who was behind those rules. But Bruce Hurd was the one who wrote this wonderful source book about a magocracy, a city or a nation that was run by magic. And in this particular product, it's a phenomenal book. Like one of the things about this particular line of products was that you just got so much great stuff in it. There was great rules material in there. Tons of great setting material in all of these, both for players and for DMs, and this particular setting as well. It's basically, imagine a bunch of different principalities, so independent kind of like mini nations, each of them ruled by very powerful magic users, but each with its own flavor. So there's a place called Clantyre that is effectively Scottish mages, Scottish Highland mages. There's a place called New Averoigne, which is effectively Clark Ashton Smith's Averoigne that was brought over into the D&D setting. So it's kind of like medieval France, got a feel of that. There's a place called, I think, Black Hill? No, what is it called? I don't know. Well, it doesn't really matter. There's another one that is called something or other, and it is effectively like, Eastern European horror stuff. So it's kind of like classic movie monsters, like vampires and whatever. And there's a whole bunch of them that are in there. So each has a very easy to kind of grok feel to it. And then there's a place called in Galantry City, the capital city of that, which is very much like kind of like a very magical Venice. There is this school of magic. And from the time I got this shortly after it came out, because I'm old, and 87, yeah, it's 87. And I have always wanted to try running a campaign with players playing students at the Great School of Magic. I know there's lots of products that have come out, and of course a very, very, very popular series of books about kids going to a school of magic. But for me, Hogwarts doesn't hold a candle to the Great School of Magic in Galantry City. And part of that is because there's great magical rules in here, and a great number of factions, not only between the different principalities, but also between the different, individual groups. So it really appealed to me, and it wasn't until this year that I decided to finally pull the trigger on it. And what I initially planned it to be just a one-shot, and to introduce a bunch of players to Pathfinder 2nd, for one, and also to really kind of stress test Pathfinder 2nd. Can I build 7 different mages or wizards and have them all really feel different? Will they really feel like authentically different characters? Because that's what the sort of advertising on the tin of Pathfinder in general, Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, is the level of customization that you get to bring to your character, both thematically and mechanically. And it seems to be going pretty well. We had a really, really fun first session of the characters kind of just arriving, getting to know each other, being immediately thrown into one of these tests. All they needed to do was put put a crown on a statue at the far end, but there were some upper year classmen who were going to try and prevent them from doing it by using these enchanted brooms. And it proved to be a really, really fun game. And part of that was also because of the mechanics of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition rule set, because it really allows you or affords you a really great set of mechanics and tools to make interesting sub-games or mini-games for your different, or for gamifying stuff on the fly. Like, we had a player who was trying to wrest control magically of an enchanted broom. So, and I'm a dummy, so I didn't think of that they were going to do that ahead of time. But once they said that, I was like, all right, well, here's how I think I'm going to structure that. Go ahead. And we kept, going back into the fiction quite a bit too. So it felt very much like playing a story game. Some of the Blades in the Dark, or say the Genesis role-playing game, the Star Wars Fantasy Flight stuff, where you're discussing the results of dice rolls. So it proved to be really, really awesome, and I'm looking forward to that. Was unfortunately the session I missed due to a migraine, but I'm looking forward to getting back to that next weekend. And then the last of our ongoing campaigns right now is a campaign playing Modiphius's Star Trek Adventures. Now, we are playing through the introductory campaign in the starter set called A Star Beyond the Stars. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, do I enjoy running this game. As context, Star Trek has been an RPG white whale for me for many, many years. I love Trek, and I love the idea of gaming in Trek. I've owned, the FASA game. I've owned the Decipher rules, the Last Unicorn game rules, and then these ones as well. But it wasn't until the starter set came out that I was finally like, all right, let's get into this. And part of that was because the core rulebook, it's a great book. It's a really, really good book. It's just a little hard to use it as a way of teaching yourself the game. The starter set, I found a much easier way of just getting myself acquainted with the different ideas, and then using the core rulebook as a reference point to kind of go and help me understand some of the more complicated or the more nuanced aspects of the rules. And man, oh man, so the core mechanic behind Star Trek Adventures is the same core mechanic behind Modiphius's Conan game, it's a 2D20 system. And I'm not going to talk about the mechanics because I tried to do that on my podcast and I ended up rambling for about half an hour. So I'm not going to talk about that. I did do a review of Conan on the channel, so maybe I'll include a link to that if you want to understand how mechanics and momentum and whatnot work. And actually, Complex Games Apologist, his channel has a really good breakdown of the mechanics of Star Trek Adventures as well too. So maybe I'll include a link to his video on that because and Runeslinger as well too. So Runeslinger and the Complex Game Apologist, both of them have terrific series of videos about Star Trek Adventures if you want to learn more about it. But the thing I really liked about it in broad strokes is how it streamlines the 2D20 mechanic. Conan is a really, really great game, I think, for a small group of players, but when you've got 4 players or 5 players, I find it bogs down a lot. Ideal number, I think, is 2 or 3 for that. Star Trek Adventures is not that way. It is very light on its feet. It allows the characters to feel like the hyper-competent members of Starfleet that they're supposed to be without making them feel like superhumans. And they do they twist the 2D20 mechanics a little bit in different areas to make for a really, really great game mechanic that both feels, tactically deep in tactical encounters, but still very, very easy to use for narrative sequences that you want to gamify in the way that you do in Apocalypse World games or in Blades in the Dark or those other kind of story games. So it's a phenomenal game. We've missed one session because we were down 2 players, so I ran a one-shot of something else. And then I was gone today. Today we were supposed to play it, but 2 weeks from now we will be back aboard the name of the vessel I can't remember right now because it's been so long. Alcibière. The USS Alcibière is where we last left our heroes, dealing with a bunch of Romulan intruders. So that's gonna be pretty great. So those are the ongoing campaigns, and those are all going pretty well. I don't know whether Star Trek Adventures is going to continue past the initial adventure. We'll see. We had initially proposed it as just being using those Sundays as like flex days to switch different games in and out, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I am. And the nice thing with that particular campaign, too, is I've got 2 players who are regular players in other games, too, and 2 players who I met at an online gaming convention. They both of them played in one of my games, and I played in one of the other players' games. And it's been great getting those guys, back in the mix. Because I chat with them on and off, but when you have someone at your table, even digitally, it's just much. You find you can get kind of further that friendship and further that that stuff beyond whatever you're playing. So that's been a lot of fun, and I mean I think that you can expect to see a lot of more adventures in the Final Frontier going forward. So that's what we did. That's where we are right now in terms of our ongoing games in those days. In the last couple of months, too, I have run a lot more one-shots than I expected, too. So things that we ran as just strictly one-shots were, let's see here, I ran a Pathfinder 2nd Edition one-shot called Vengeful Crows of Winter, which was me trying to see if I could adapt the Pathfinder 2nd Edition game to suit a gritty kind of samurai, ersatz medieval Japan setting, kind of like a classic AD&D Oriental Adventure style setting with, not quite as high fantasy and polished as like Rokugan for Legend of the Five Rings, something that was a little more earthy, and we only ran one session of it that was 3 hours, and it was a lot of fun. Both players said they had a good time. I had a ton of fun running that, and I think that the game worked really well. Like the mechanics did a fine job of covering everything we needed, and so I would be inclined to maybe revisit that setting at some point too. Though if you keep revisiting every setting that you get interested in, you're gonna find your entire week filled up very, very quickly. I also ran a Starfinder one shot for running the free RPG day adventure from last year, from 2018, called Skittershot, which was cool, and I got to meet a new player as well too, which was great because we had it was someone who was a friend of a friend who was asking about using Roll20, and I suggested, a friend suggested that I use it quite a bit. So hey, maybe Kev could help you with this stuff. And what I suggested instead was like, well, why don't we just set up a one shot, and I'll as we go through, I'll describe this stuff, and then I decided to run Starfinder for it because I was really enjoying Starfinder, and that was a lot of fun. It was cool seeing different players who don't normally play in my Starfinder campaign take on the Starfinder rules. So that was really cool. I also ran a one shot when we were down a couple players in my ongoing campaign, where I ran what I call a war stories session. From years and years, what I would do is when sometimes in the course of a campaign, either because of we had a different attendance for a week, or because I had a story element I wanted to introduce, or a character element I wanted to explore, I'll run something called a war story session. And war stories is set in the past or a different part of the world or whatever, and it is effectively just a one shot that has some intended story purpose to it. And it's also kind of a fun release valve. So if you want to do if you want to have a kind of a pause from your ongoing campaign, it's a good opportunity to just fill in some interesting backstory. Let the players run something, some one-shot characters. Have one of the characters from the ongoing campaign maybe as the still featured character, but it allows them to kind of drive it's like a rental car. You drive the shit out of that thing because you ain't ever going to see it again. So I ran a Starfinder one of that leaned heavily into kind of a horror vibe for it, which was pretty fun. We did the draw for we had both the start and the finale of the Hero Save Villages raffle. Well, that's not true. It started in April, but so this year, what we did regular viewers may know that we have the Heroes Save Villages raffle or charity campaign, and it's something that I run to. We don't monetize the channel. Forgive me if you've heard this spiel before, but we don't monetize the channel. We don't run ads. We don't run a Patreon. Instead, what we do is we run a charity fundraising campaign, and it benefits a thing called SOS Children's Villages International. And they are a terrific organization that benefits over 80,000 orphan and abandoned children in over 130 different countries. It's a organization that I have been held very dear to my heart for a number of years. And this has been, the past year or so, we've raised now just over $3,000 for the campaign, and that's phenomenal. And I got a very, very lovely thank you note from the organization, and I got a lovely tie that I'll be wearing at an upcoming Discovery. And we also had a really terrific experience with some publishers as well who donated product to help us, because we had a raffle. So I had purchased myself the Platinum Edition Beetle and Grimm, this company that Matt Lillard, the actor, is involved with. They produce these great books or great products called Platinum Edition or Silver Edition things, and presumably there's going to be a Gold Edition at some point as well. But you can see one of them right here, actually. Boom, right there. That's the Silver Edition of the Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign. But I bought the Dragon Heist, their first one, the Platinum Edition, which was this massive thing. And I got it, and then as I read through it, my intent was to use it for our gaming marathon. And then as I read it through, I just decided, I don't really, same for me, I'm not really a Waterdeep fan. I don't really care for the adventure all that much. It's just not something that I'm interested in running. Certainly not for the one shot. But then I decided that, well, if I'm not going to, there's no sense in me keeping this thing. That's silly. So I decided to set up a raffle, a charity, and see if I could raffle it off, get people to donate to the campaign, and then, give them tickets, and then we do a live raffle draw. Well, lo and behold, we ended up raising about $1,700 of the $3,000 we raised. So for slightly over $3,000, so about $1,700 of that came from that raffle, which was amazing. And we also, we had donations come in from a bunch of different publishers, including Cubicle 7 and Pelgrane Press and, Modifius, and who else donated? I'm forgetting. Forgive me for any publishers that did donate to this, and I forget. Oh, of course, Beetle and Grimm. So Beetle and Grimm, when we reached out to them about this, they donated a copy of this sucker right here, of the Sinister Silver Edition of the Ghost of Saltmarsh. And afterwards, when we sent out the thank yous to everyone was very very grateful, or very I'm glad to hear the campaign went well. The one publisher that got back to us and said, let us know when you're doing it again, let us know how we can help again, was Beetle and Grimm, and they're fucking awesome. I cannot say enough good things. Not only did they make an amazing product, but they were so generous with their the amount of product that they donated in terms of dollar value that it's just blew our socks off and really helped us to raise a lot of money. But in addition to that $1,700, the rest of the money came from players and donors, from the Heroes Save Villages campaign. And some of that comes from the charity sessions. Every year I set up a certain number of charity sessions that are available. So people who donate $100, I'll run a free, not free, but they'll donate, and I'll run a 4-hour session for them. They can pick a game, they can play with them, their own players, they can play with me, my players, whatever they want, and whatever game, so long as it's something I own. And to be honest, even if it's something I don't own, I'll probably purchase it anyway. So I don't mind running whatever they want. But that usually I set that because I know I don't want to overwhelm myself with that. I don't want it to become the full content in the channel. I limit it usually to about 4. I can't remember if it's 4 or 6. It's either 4 or 6 sessions a year, and they were gone very quickly. But the rest of it is all just donations from very generous people. People who have been donating to the channel, and it's to the point now where the 3,000 was supposed to be the annual target. That was going to be our annual target till the end of 2019, and we've hit it now. So we have 4 more months to go. So I'm going to be amending either later tonight or tomorrow. I'm editing the the donor page to add new no options for donation. Things that have been popular is like contributing hero points to the players. If players are in a spot of danger, we've had people sometimes donate money so that the players can get hero points or action points or astonishing fortune, so they can save their bacon, and that's fine. That's cool. But we've also had people donate money to add NPCs to the campaign. That's one option that's on there. But what I want to do is I want to come up, if there are better suggestions for what you folks think might be more appealing to and give you a feeling of more value for your donation. I can't add more charity sessions per year just because I only have so many hours in the day. And again, like I really enjoy running those, but they are a great deal of work because because people have given their hard-earned money to the charity. I want to make sure they get their value for that. But also, I have a lot of ongoing campaigns too, so I don't want to overwhelm things. So I can't do that. But what I was thinking is adding a $50 option. So if you donate $50, what you can do is suggest a theme. So it could be horror or loss or family or whatever, whatever theme you want to suggest. And then I'll write a session for one of our ongoing campaigns that specifically plays up that theme. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to necessarily play in it. So there's not that level of engagement, which is why it's a lesser amount than the $100 level. But hopefully that gives something that, that might allow you to feel, or the donors to feel like they're participating and adding something to the campaign other than, just adding an NPC to the campaign. So that's all I've got right now, to be honest. And I will give context because I see my primary role here as running games for the people who are playing. The people who are playing, just like me, no one's financially compensated to play in this. We're all playing together because we love playing together, and that's that. And as such, I don't want to introduce anything that affects the flow of the game, in the way that a lot of other streamers do, where you can donate and add story elements or things like that. Because I don't want to ever say no to a donor, because again, they've given their money. I want to make sure that the responsibility for running a entertaining and engaging session rests on my shoulders, and I don't want to feel that's hampered one way or the other by, suggestions from the peanut gallery, particularly if they run, what I've seen on other streams is stuff that's a little more gonzo or a little more silly, and that's not really the sensibility for the games I run, so I'd rather not open it up to that level of direct interaction with the stream as it goes. But if you have any suggestions, I'll say at the end of the stream the ways of contacting me too. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear some suggestions of ways I could other rewards I could put up there. Let's see here. Other games that are kind of got distracted by the Hero Save Villages thing. Apart from the one-shots and the ongoing campaigns, we've also seen a couple other games kind of come and go in the last couple of months. In the reverse order, from the most recent till the latest, we had, before we started playing Gallantry, we were running a separate Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea game called Tuliborg Tales. And that was fun. It was a really fun game, but most of those players asked me, once I started running the Pathfinder Burmese game, they all asked me if they could try Pathfinder 2, or said, hey, I'd be interested in joining in a Pathfinder 2 game. And that's why I designed the Gallantry one to throw a one-shot in. It serviced some other White Whale, gaming stuff that I had anyway. And it turned out it was a really great, reaction. We all really enjoyed it. So we're going to keep going with that for now. And Tuliborg Tales is going to be on hiatus until we get bored of this. I was also running on Wednesdays and Thursdays something called Dead Roads. So it was using a modified or house-ruled version of Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea to run, where is it here? Ron Lundine's very cool. Oh, and I don't know where I put it. It's the first module in the Tyrant's Grasp adventure path for Pathfinder. What I wanted to do is to see what a game might feel like taking a modern module, like a Pathfinder module, and running it with an old-school system like Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. And it turned out it was a lot of fun. It was a really, really good game. It's a great module, lots of really inventive and unique kind of things going on, some fun puzzles, some weird, trippy, dreamy stuff in there. But now then we started playing Burmese, and Burmese is easier to have players drop in, drop out than what what the Dead Roads would be. And also, it would require a lot of either conversion or house rule stuff, because a lot of the elements in Dead Roads are from very late in the product life cycle for Pathfinder, so there's a lot of stuff I don't have stats for. And at the time of recording, the Game Mastery Guide for Pathfinder 2nd is not out, which means I don't have rules for writing monsters yet. So I can't create my monsters apart from just making up shit on the fly. And so for now, I'm just gonna, Burmese is the focus. We're not gonna be continuing on with that particular campaign either. I have played in a 3 or 4 shot game that my buddy Arlen Walker ran on the channel, running the One Ring role-playing game. That's this bad boy here, also published by Cubicle 7. And Arlen not only is a terrific dungeon master, it's also a really, really, really good game. Like, I had a lot of fun playing that game. I played a Hobbit. So I played a non-combat character who's much more of a support character than anything, and I just had a ton of fun playing that character. Any game that allows you to play a role and have meaningful interaction with a game and with a campaign when you're playing the hover in the back character is great. I love that stuff. Like, I'm not at the forefront of combat. I'm not, what else was he doing? I mean, he just wasn't. He was what hobbits were in the books, where they were an important part of the party. But I mean, like, they weren't the ones clashing with the Nazgul. They're not the ones who are jumping in and scrapping with the orcs in the front line. It's a great game, and Arlen did a terrific job of running it both times. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do more of that on the channel as well too, where we're going to have other people play. But I'm mindful of the reason we primarily don't do that more on the channel is because it seems that every other channel does monetize, and I don't want to force DMs, other people, to not pursue that opportunity. I don't have any objection to people monetizing their channels or anything like that, or running ads. Gotta eat, and so for that reason, that's one of the primary reasons why I'm not. You're not seeing other DMs and so forth on the channel, even though we're growing and we're trying to add more content. That's the primary reason. I don't want anyone to feel the obligation to give up the potential for ad money and whatnot from this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm cognizant of the fact that the size of our subscriber base, which I'm very grateful for, is not in the I'm not working my day job anymore level. All the same, the principle is what matters, is that I don't want someone to think they have to do something for free. But that said, I am hoping that Arlen will agree to run some more One Ring for us, because I had so much fun playing that game. We also ran a very short campaign running the old Marvel Superheroes role-playing game published by TSR back in the 80s. And we were running that campaign with some characters playing Alpha Flight, members of the Canadian Super Team in a Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Alpha Flight. And it was a lot of fun. It was for the 3 or 4 sessions that we played, it was a really, really great game, and it was a great kind of break leading up until the time that I had to leave for vacation in June. We haven't gone back to it, and the primary reason we haven't is because it is a lot harder to manage that game as an ongoing campaign for a flexible table, for a rotating table of players, than, say, Burmese is, or than, say, Dead Roads was. So for that reason, it was a great game. I had a lot of fun with it. It's a really terrific superhero game. And I personally, as a DM, it was fun writing scripted content for that. It was a lot more heavily scripted than what a lot of my other games are. So in the sense that there was, framed scenes and so forth in it. So, but it was great. And the players role played the hell out of the characters too. So that certainly added to my enjoyment. And then most recently we ran a one-shot for Star Wars Edge of the Empire campaign. Arlen, again, one of my regular players, my buddy, he had just kind of got into the Star Wars fantasy, or the Fantasy Flight Star Wars role-playing games, and he's like, I'd be interested in seeing it play. And I said, well, let's play it. So I ran the starter adventure from the beginner box from Edge of the Empire, and it's a really great adventure. And the system is, I think that in comparison, in the same way that running Pathfinder 2 back-to-back with Starfinder made me feel like, oof, Starfinder's not as good as it could be, or could use some changes. I was running Star Trek Adventures at the same time I was running Fantasy Flight Star Wars' game, and the dice mechanic behind Star Trek Adventures has the benefit of development ideas and game mechanics that had the benefit of seeing how the Star Trek or Star Wars games played out. So they made changes to the issues that I found with that particular game. I don't want to get into it too much because it is a terrific game, and it's really is a matter of taste for me. I running that was both really great to get back to the Star Wars game, but also reminding me why I don't want to run that as an ongoing game, because the dice mechanic in that I find to be awfully swingy, and it's not. I want something with a little more certainty with it. So, but that said, it was a fun session, and everyone gained the hell out of it. So that brings us up to date. I guess the last things I'll talk about. Let's transition now into talking about what I've got planned for the next 4 months. So one of the things I need to get done is I've got 4 more charity games to get done. People who have donated money. One of those is a session for Arlen, running the One Ring role-playing game. That's actually what prompted him running that for me in the first place was, hey, why don't I run it for you? You can see what it's like, and then you'll know, or have some understanding of what the game is for when you run my session. And that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm running the Fantasy Flight Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game. I got a one-shot for that for my buddy Dave, who plays in our bunch of our regular games. That one is going to come up, that should be next, but we'll see when for scheduling for that one. That's another charity session that Dave donated last year, or late last year, or early this year. I can't remember what time, but in any event, he's got a game coming up for that. I also have a 2-part session for another very generous viewer and donor, another George, who loves the hero system. And I have been, he for one has actually very generously invited me to play in his campaigns a number of times too, and just scheduling has not permitted me to play in that. I've made a character for his game yet, but I haven't had a chance to play in it. But he and I are, one of the things that he and I have in common, in addition to loving the hero system, is we're both lawyers. So he's suggested some really great products for me in the past to snag, particularly the Stronghold book for Hero, which is like the book on like the justice system in the superhero world and prison in the superhero world and stuff like that. And for me, it's really, I find that stuff really interesting. But I've got a pretty special 2-shot session planned for him with that, which I'm really looking forward to running. And then finally, for my other buddy George, I am running a continuation of his charity session from last year. Last year, he very generously donated to the campaign, and we ran a one-shot with him and his buddies, which was a ton of fun, and I'm looking forward to getting back to those characters again for part 2, even though I've warned him that the second chapter in a Star Wars saga is usually the darkest. So that's what we got for the charity games coming up. I'm also going to try and do a better job of recording more actual play content in the next 4 months as well. At least one a month. I'm going to try and record something. But the trouble is for one thing, because I have a podcast as well, that often is my outlet for broadcasting, more like general game discussion stuff. So, like I've done sessions on fitting of rules and setting. I've done 10, tips for running great one-shots. I've talked about, how your setting incentivizes ethics for your characters. But I don't know. Well, for one thing, I don't think it would translate terribly well if I just take the audio and put it with no background in a YouTube file, like as a YouTube posting. So I don't know if that's what people would actually want, if they can just enjoy it on the podcast. And I often don't want to revisit that stuff because this channel is a passion project. I do this because I love doing it, and also it helps that we get to raise some money for some very needy kids. So, I want to make sure it's something that is useful for people, as well as something that actually interests me and doesn't feel like work. I already have a job and I don't want to do a second one. in addition, there's already so much content out there of channels that do like DM's guides or things like that. So unless it's something that I find is really pertinent to an ongoing game that I've got that I think will be really might be helpful for people, it's hard to force myself to sit down and do an episode like that. I am trying to be better with spotting ideas. For instance, I've got an idea for doing a video on reskinning Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And I think I could probably even expand that out to talk about reskinning in other games, but I don't know, for one, whether that actually would be of interest to anyone. So if you would be interested in hearing about that, let me know. I also don't know how long that would be. I don't know how long that... These videos tend to be like a piece of string. They're as long as they need to be. So I don't know how long that would be. But I guess the other thing is if you do have suggestions, or if you've got questions that you'd like me to address. People have been really active in the chat in the last little while. And in addition, since we set up the Discord server, which you can find a link to in the description of the video, we started seeing a lot more chat on there. So I'm doing a lot more interacting with people on there as well. So I am trying to branch out and do more of those too. I've had some people ask about reviews as well too, and regular viewers of the channel will know that I have a pretty strong opinion as far as when you can effectively review a product. I don't think, and this is just a personal thing, if other people feel they can review things, that's fine. I don't feel you can properly review a role-playing product without running it or without playing it. Matt Colville has a really great kind of one-liner where he says that, the game is not the meal. He analogizes it to like the book. This is the recipe. The meal is the play of the game at the table. And in my personal experience, I've had so many games where I've read them and had one opinion, and then I ran them and I'm like, oh my God, like that was wrong. Savage Worlds is particularly that way. Shadow of the Demon Lord was good from the get-go. I'm trying to think of other games that have... I think Pathfinder 2nd Edition. For some people, if you're not getting it to the table and you're not actually playing it, it looks so much more complicated than what it actually is. It is such a fast-playing game that it's just hidden behind a 500 or 640-page rule book. So for that reason, what it means is that I really want to make sure I've run a game and have a clear idea of what it looks like at the table before I do a review. And in connection with that, I prefer to not do negative content. If there's a game that I don't particularly like, people work very hard on these products, and taste is completely subjective. So just because I didn't particularly like a certain game, I don't want, to shit on someone else's hard work just because it wasn't to my liking. Some people like cilantro, some people don't like cilantro. I don't want to shit on people who work hard on developing, producing cilantro just because I don't happen to like it. That's a really terrible metaphor, but I take it you know what I mean from that. So, and for that reason too, you may notice that I often don't talk about when I'm going to review things anymore, because I had one or two products that I did review that I really didn't care for, and I didn't want to just give a resounding, all rosy, only nice review, because I didn't want anyone to buy that product and not get my honest opinion on it. So, that said, what I am trying to do is... I might be using, depending on how fast I can get through and start applying the material from the different Pathfinder books, that I can see myself being able to do proper comprehensive overviews the way I did for the core rulebook, where I ramble for a very long time about the particular book. And those types of reviews are not for everybody, but you will fortunately be able to find tons of camera down, page by page, telling you what's in there, reviews out there. So you're going to have, if what I got to have on offer ain't for you, there's going to be plenty of other options on offer there. But if you want something that's the way I do my overviews, which is very long, very comprehensive, very from the table experience, it just takes time to get those in fighting form. Yeah, I mean, that is, those are the two things I want to do. On a personal note too, I've set myself a goal of, I'm signing up for Skillshare this weekend and starting to learn about video editing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to start editing these videos or my actual plays, because I just don't want to, to be honest. What we try to do, what we capture from our live plays is the warts and all experience of a game at the table. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it goes poorly. Sometimes, seeing the different types of players that you have at our particular table is different, I think, from some other, some other actual plays. And I don't want this to sound negative by any means, but like I don't have actors playing at the table. I don't have people who are contractually obliged to be there. Like everyone who's playing in mine are just people who like being there. And to be clear as well too, this is I'm not like making a offhand comment to Critical Role. I think Critical Role is a genuine amazing play experience of specific players. They just happen to all be voice actors, and they happen to be playing in that particular type of very playing with the audience kind of way. That's how I don't for a second think that they are not absolutely genuinely, they would be playing that way if there was no cameras and there was no, fans or whatever else. There are other podcasts or other actual plays, I think, that have tried to ape that feel a lot more artificial. So what that means is that our actual plays may not be for everyone either. We have a rotating cast for it too, but we, right now our cast is kind of all, a bunch of white dudes who are in their 30s to 40s. And in that in mind, I also want, and because I've heard recently a lot from some people who have asked about playing in my games, from now until the end of the year, I'm also going to introduce once a month, I'm going to have an open table. And the open table will be, it's a session that'll accommodate up to about four or five players. I'll probably run Pathfinder 2nd because that's the game that I seems to be the most popular right now. And to be honest, also I love running it. I wouldn't be running a game strictly because it's popular. I have to actually like what I'm running to want to run it. But what it'll be is strictly for people who don't play in one of my ongoing campaigns. So if you're someone who's played in a one-shot, you're absolutely welcome back again. But if you are interested in playing in one of the games, I'm going to be posting on the Discord about those particular sessions, and I'll also post in the community tab of our YouTube channel. So what that'll be, and the first one will likely be closer to the end of the month in September. So if you have emailed me at some point and I've gotten back to you like, hey, I'll get back to you. First off, I'm sorry I have not gotten back to you sooner. It's been very busy, so it's been hard to stay on top of the amount of emails I'm getting from really awesome people who seem wanting to or interested in playing. For those folks, if you hear this, I'd encourage you to sign up for the Discord, or it doesn't cost anything, obviously. And if all you do is lurk around on the one channel that will be for the monthly one-shots, then that's where I'll be posting the information about the time for the game, the whatever. And what I'm hoping is that will give an opportunity for more people to get a chance to play. If you are interested in playing, I don't want to sound too egotistical here, but if you are interested in playing in one of my games, or playing in a game with me is an appropriate way of putting it, that's what that opportunity will be. It'll be a chance for us all to get together and, play some Pathfinder and slay some monsters, maybe kill some PCs. I don't know. We'll see how things go. But that way it's intentionally offering a way of expanding the player pool as well too. Part of the best, well, probably the best thing about this whole year's exercise of intentionally expanding the player pool is how many great people I've met. And with that in mind, if you can't make one of those sessions, or you do want to join another ongoing campaign, now that we've got a Discord server too, there's a lot of the players from my games who are interested in running other things too, and it's all online. And that's a place where you can find. We've got a specific channel on the Discord server that specifically deals with looking for people who are wanting to run a specific type of game. We've got people running Paladin, the Pendragon RPG knockoff. Or not knockoff, but like I don't know. Knockoff is a fine enough word for it. And we've got someone who's looking for people to play Microscope. So if you even if you're not able to make one of my games, those open table games, then yeah, that's what do you call it? That's a way of finding really good people to play with. Everyone who I've met through the channel so far has been a terrific gamer, great person to talk to, great person to yak about games, and the Discord channel or server is proving to be a pretty fun place for me to hang out. Your mileage may vary, but I like the people who have joined that so far. I'll also just quickly say that, I'm blessed right now with a very full table of players who want to regularly make the sessions, and yeah, and because of that, like that's why I don't have open spots in the other ongoing campaigns right now. It's just that right now, depending on the game, there's a certain chemistry that comes from a table, and when you have that chemistry working, DMs, if they have any level of experience, will understand what I mean. Like when you get a group together and it's working, you really kind of want to kind of like run that horse as long as you can, or ride that horse as long as you can, and that's the reason why we're not just like regularly dropping people into ongoing campaigns. So my apologies for that, but again, like my primary responsibility, as far as I see it, is to the players to make sure they're getting the best experience, because if they're getting the best experience, it probably makes for the best viewing experience too. So anyway, let's talk about the other games. So I had recently said on Twitter a bunch of games that I set out as kind of my public shaming of myself to set that I wanted to get to the table before the end of the year. And there's 8 games that I've listed. And with the amount of one-shots that I've run in the last little while, I think this is hopefully a doable goal. So, yeah, we'll see if this works out. But what those games are is we'll go through here. Let's see here. First up is, boom, Cubicle 7's Doctor Who role-playing game. Something I've bought. I love Doctor Who. I've loved it since I'm of the age that I came in with Tom Baker, the 4th Doctor, as my Doctor. But I've watched it all the way through for the original series, and then with the new versions as well too. I love it. Running Star Trek and finding a role-playing game that suited the sensibilities of the Trek property was so great with Star Trek Adventures, and it seems like this is going to do the same for Doctor Who. And this whole product line thus far has been incredible. Like, so much great material. It's to be honest, I mean, it's true of every Cubicle 7 product that I've purchased has been amazing. It's got great value for dollar, tons of great stuff in there, solid rules. So, before the end of the year, we're getting to the TARDIS. I'm going to get this sucker to the table. We'll see. Next, I have a one-shot coming up. Oh, I want to do for GURPS, the Generic Universal Role-Playing System, published by Steve Jackson Games. This is a bit of an older one, but it is a old love of mine too. In the late life cycle of 3rd edition D&D, or 3.5, I really got kind of burned out on the D20 games, so I actually got into GURPS. I had purchased 3rd edition GURPS before and some books for it, but never ran it. But this is the 4th edition, and this one I completely fell in love with. I've used it to run a wide variety of different things in the past, including like Old West horror and pirate horror, and I ran a short campaign with the New Warriors, the Marvel superheroes, and I've run sci-fi. So it's it's I think it's a really, really great system. And I had been pitching it to Arlen again too. I was stuck in a meeting, and I didn't have to pay attention in it, so we were talking on Twitter about this, and I started talking about GURPS, and that's what got me thinking about it. So. And then another player, James, who plays in our Star Trek Adventures game, both of them, I've kind of talked up GURPS to them, so I'm going to run a one-shot of GURPS for them, and I think what I'm going to do is set it in the pulp era, and it's going to have kind of a mystic, punch-a-Nazi kind of vibe to it, so a 30s pulpy kind of thing. Should be fun. I also mentioned the charity session for Champions. I'm very much looking forward to running that again. A relatively new game that I picked up, but I've really fallen for, and recently kind of grasped. I finally kind of got my hand on what I want to do with it, and that's White Wolf's old Aberrant role-playing game, and this is from the late '90s. It came out as part of their trilogy of games that dealt with kind of like it started in the 30s or 20s and 30s, and then went up to the modern day with Aberrant with superhumans. The other one was a pulp serial kind of thing, or pulp game, and then there's one set in the future called Trinity. And Aberrant is very kind of like postmodern superheroics in the sense that like it doesn't embrace the idea of superheroes as it's very like post Alan Moore, post Frank Miller kind of dark and edgy stuff, but in a more palatable way than, say, like Image Comics was, if that makes sense. And I got an interesting idea of how to approach a one-shot with this, and the game just looks really good. Like I love the setting. I love the setup for the setting as well too. I love the way that they've tied together a unified power source, and they've made a really, really interesting question over what is humanity, I guess, in it. I think that's at its core. You know, what is, if you are effectively like a demigod with that kind of power, what is your relationship to humankind then? And the world, not only does your character struggle with that internally, there's also effectively kind of like, you know, externalized forces that will be fighting that argument in your world too. So I think it's going to be interesting, and it's got a great rule set too. Very quick and easy playing. Next up is, boom, the newest edition of Vampire the Masquerade. I've been a long time fan of White Wolf's games, and this newest edition, the thing that I find the most fascinating about it, regular viewers of the channel may have heard me talk about Vampire before. When I was a kid, I was much more into the idea of Vampire and like the politics of the particular setting. If you're not familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, the game is it's billed as a game of personal horror, but really most of the play seems to be the politicking among the different vampires who make up any given city. And some of that relates to the different clans that they are members of, which you can think of as like genealogies of vampirism, you know, that lead back to some progenitor, and then they kind of flow out, and each has different kind of powers and people that they would embrace to become vampires. And there's this ornate kind of, or elaborate, political structure in the city with different roles and so forth. And at the time, I thought it was really cool. Now it strikes me as, and this is purely my own sensibilities, I find it silly. And I think that's because of the few times I've engaged in live action role playing, and it's due to my own hangups and my own, sensibilities. I just did not get into that very much. I love role playing. Live action role playing felt kind of silly to me, and part of the self-seriousness of the old game felt, I just didn't really, I couldn't ever grasp what to do with the game to make it fun for me. This is a reworking of the rules, and it seems to me that this is designed to be played in effectively like a sandbox style. There are mechanics in here that force your characters to engage with the fiction, to get back to the world and interact with different parts of the world that aren't just, politicking. Like you have to hunt, and then there's different types of blood, like blood, not types of blood, but it has different kind of like spiritual, kind of like keying or like tone to it. So it can have an effect on your character as you go, or you might need to hunt down a specific type of character. And then there's other elements of sandbox play that I recognize as like it establishes your characters to have a certain area of the city that they control and whatnot. So it grinds your character down in there. You've got ongoing reasons because of the necessity of your supernatural biological needs, in addition to the political stuff that's going on. But even that is managed in a much more interesting way, because it is set up to be subjective to your character. You draw these maps of like relationships between the characters, which I didn't even think of this before. So it's, I don't know why, but there's a brilliant bit of insight to shift the focus from like, this is how the city is set up with all the tiers and blah, 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 to be like, no, who gives a shit about that? How does it relate to your individual character? And that to me seems fascinating, because in the same way that I enjoy the kind of seeing where players go in my Burmese game and in my Ash game, that I think is what I'm going to get out of this, is we'll set up the characters in one point, we'll set some rough kind of relationships with other characters, and we'll just see where they go. I'll introduce a problem, and then we'll see what happens from that. And that, to me, seems like a lot of fun for something to run. And the tools they give you with that particular game too is amazing. It looks like it makes the job of the DM a lot easier, in the same way that old school games make the job a lot easier. If you run OSR games with random encounters and simplified character stats, that's why you can run those games in a random encounter kind of way. And similarly, they've taken that approach with Vampire the Masquerade. So looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I also have now that I've actually started running Star Trek, this is my biggest white whale. and regular viewers of the channel have heard me harp about this, or listeners of the podcast. Mage the Ascension. This is my favorite of the old White Wolf games. The original 5, which were Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, and Changeling the Dreaming. Of those 5, this was my absolute favorite. It's a really fascinating setting where you're playing characters who are modern day mages, but the way that the mages work is that your soul, your character's soul, the kind of fragment of the primal, avatar from, time immemorial, it is so powerful that you can actually warp reality to fit your belief and your will. But otherwise, the rules of reality are such that reality functions the way it does because of consensus belief. Everyone believes that electricity passing through wires powers devices. So that's why it works that way. And that it harkens back to kind of like the mythic age where there was a struggle for what the modern world would look like. And there's the fight over big ideas that goes on in that. And I just find that, it's been one of those games that when I read it when I was a kid, it stuck with me forever. It was such a fascinating idea to grapple with. And I ran it when I was a kid, but as an adult, I've had a lot harder time figuring out what I'm going to do with it. And recently, at the same time I had my bit of like a moment of clarity with Aberrant, I realized that I just need to start small. I need to figure a small focus for these characters, and I can tell a small and intimate story about belief, about these characters, about these powerful characters acting in a world where the rest of reality is effectively hostile towards them, because what happens in the game when you try and warp reality, depending on whether you're being, arrogant and trying to blatantly break the rules, as it were, in front of people, you can get slapped down by something called paradox, which is basically like realities that I think they described it in the original rule book as the reality's bitch slap. But it's effectively like it's the tension of stretching reality to its limits and then letting it go and slap back on that mage for reworking reality. It's not every time necessarily, but it's a risk they run each time. And it's just by virtue of the way that everyone believes things to work. So I'm interested in exploring that, and I think I finally have an idea for how to do that in a small session, in a small 1 or 2 shot session. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And the last one I have on my list is the Infinity role-playing game, also by Modifius. Now, my understanding is that this was originally based on a I understand it's popular. I don't do any wargaming anymore, so I'm totally out of that scene, but I understand that Corvus Belli is a company that produces this Infinity war game, which is supposed to be really popular. I've seen that some of the YouTubers who are war gamers that I follow, they've kind of dabbled with some of that squad level skirmish game as well. But what interested me about it is for one, I actually only backed it initially because I wanted some sci-fi rules that were 2d20. And the setting is a interesting mix of like some space opera stuff with some transhumanist stuff with some cyberpunk stuff with some other unique things like sci-fi things put in the mix too. And because it uses the 2d20 system, same one that Conan uses and that Star Trek uses, it tweaks it again, but that's a really pulpy, high-action kind of mechanic, so I'm interested in that. There's different types. Not only is there like computer hacking, because it's a high tech setting, and there's normal combat, and there's social stuff. There's actually like social war. There's like social engineering war in it, and I haven't read the game enough to know what the hell that's about, but it seems intriguing to me. There's a bunch of, because it owes its roots in a war game that has different factions, there's fully realized different factions from that setting as well. But the thing is it doesn't feel like it was bolted on, they bolted on a role-playing game to a war game that had factions because the war games needed to have different factions to sell. And it feels like it's a fully realized world in which you can play a role-playing game. And I think it's because the war game, from what I understand, originated as a role-playing game. There was a role-playing campaign, a custom campaign that these guys were playing, and then it evolved into them developing this game, this war game that became quite successful, and then kind of came full circle. They kickstarted the role-playing game, and here we are. And I got a soft spot for kind of like this cyberpunk, transhumanist, kind of hard sci-fi settings. So, I mean, Shadowrun is definitely not a hard sci-fi setting, but Shadowrun 6th edition is out right now, and I've loved Shadowrun for a long, long time. And if the starter set was less of a mess, I would probably give that one a try. And I'm looking forward to when the core rulebook for Shadowrun 6th comes out, and I might run that. I might take a look at that, but for now, I've got the PDF, and I flipped through it, and it seems to me, at first glance, to be about as complicated as what for the 5th edition was, and that's too much game for me. It's too much game for me to help new players or people jumping into a one shot to learn. You may note that a lot of the games that I run on the channel do not have a extraordinarily complex setting, and part of that is because I don't want the players to have to go to the length of learning all the intricacies of a setting. That's why I don't run, primarily I don't run Numenera, the Monty Cook game. It's a fascinating setting, but it's just way too much. I don't want to have to parse that down into bite-sized chunks and slowly walk the characters through. Neither do I want to have to read a 300-page fucking, world setting thing just to run the damn game. It needs to be bite-sized chunks. That's where this is a bit of an outlier. Like this is a pretty complicated game. However, I've got their starter set as well too, and it looks really manageable. So it'll get a sense of what's in there, and see if the game is fun, if the setting is fun, and then if so, I can go back to this and dive further in, because I have kind of gone whole hog on this. Because every little bit I have read about this, it has been amazing, really interesting stuff. I mentioned Shadowrun because that normally would fit that kind of near future kind of stuff, where I'm not so far in the future. I'm playing Traveler or Starfinder or Stars Without Number. There's another game also that when I made my list, was not out yet, and that is Eclipse Phase 2nd edition. And I've got my physical copy coming to me in the mail. Eclipse Phase is another transhumanist game, but it is transhumanist fused with horror and conspiracy. And regular viewers of the channel may know that one of those really kind of rings my bell. I love me some horror in my role-playing games, so that really appeals to me. The 1st edition game was quite good. It was just too much world to make for bite-sized chunks, but the 2nd edition, they have intentionally made both the mechanics and the setting more easily understood. And I've read their starter set as well too, and it's terrific. I wish I had that to hold up for you as well, but the game is called Eclipse Phase, and you can find a free starter set online as well too. And if you haven't checked that out, I'd suggest just snagging the starter set. If you like things like Blade Runner 2099, or in particular Altered Carbon, the idea of mixing, between or jumping between different sleeves, and that being kind of a ubiquitous thing, that is very Eclipse Phase. Eclipse Phase feels, if you like The Expanse, if you like that kind of hard sci-fi with more of a transhumanist bent to it, like Altered Carbon, you'll find a lot to like in that particular game. And if you don't want to do that, hopefully you'll see that on the channel sometime soon, and that'll give you a sense of what is the game and what it'll look like in play. Last thing, let's quickly. I see there was a couple people in chat here. Let's see what. Hey, Arlen, what's shaking? Patrick, yeah, West Marches style. You're absolutely right. So Patrick says in chat that West Marches style. What West Marches? If you're not familiar with the old school Renaissance kind of scene, there's a style of play that has been called the West Marches style of play, and what that is basically a way of describing the rotating table that you'd have in those types of games. These games typically begin and end at the local inn or tavern, where whoever's organized the session gets together, and then they go out and do some adventures, and they come back. It's a persisting world, so whatever they've done during that expedition, it changes the world irrevocably. Either it slays certain creatures that are out there, or you have new corpses you can loot of player characters who died when they were out there. For the classic West Marches approach, it is the players who set the schedule for it. My buddy Jason Hobbs does that on his Kalmata game as well too. You can Jason Hobbs has his own YouTube channel where he runs those games. He also has a terrific Hobbs and Friends of the OSR podcast and the Hex Talk podcast, both of which deal with that kind of stuff in great detail. For my games, they're not quite West Marches games in the sense that the players don't schedule the time. I have a set session, a set date for it. This is when this is when we're playing. Whoever's showing up, that's what we'll do. We ran our first try with Barrow Maze in more of a classic West Marches, where we always got back to the inn at the end, and then whoever was there next time, we went on from that. Whoever was there next time, that was the party going out into the Barrow Maze. This time around, we're leaning more into a traditional style of play. So, like, whoever's there, if their character is not there, or the player isn't there, their character doesn't do anything that session. And then now that we've reached the point where different groups of players are geographically at different places in the Duchy of Eric, what we're introducing is a whole bunch of new characters that are first-level henchmen to start with, that they'll play, if one player is available to make a session where the majority of the other players, their characters are somewhere else, well, then that one player will play their henchman character, and then vice versa, So that allows us to keep playing the game and keep following these characters along, the main characters, as it were, the main characters, while not leaving certain players out. So it's West Marches is a really interesting way of structuring a campaign. For this time around, though, I'm deciding to do something a little different. Do not like running games with a similar rule set. No, I mean, I guess it's not for everyone. For me, I came from running a lot of universal games. The hero system is a universal rule set. The GURPS is a universal rule set. Those are Palladium for when I was a kid. Riffs and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness and Robotech and Beyond the Supernatural. All of these games had a core mechanic, and then you would just do different things with them. It's more of a modern development where you're building a rule set specifically to suit your style of play, and I totally get that. And I see pluses and minuses from both. The upside to making a game or rules mechanic that specifically suits the game that you're trying, or the experience you're trying to have. Yeah, like that's great, but the upside to having a unified rule set is that players don't have to keep relearning the rules as well as the settings. So, it depends on I can see both sides. And a lot of those universal rule sets, they're very modular. So you can, not the Palladium one, Hero and GURPS are definitely modular, and you can tweak them, you can change certain things in them so they can suit whatever the particular setting you're going for is. So yeah, but I mean, like I say, it's not for everyone. Mac Black, hey everyone, hey Mac Black. Killraven, many people don't mind audio only YouTube. Okay, cool. That's actually, yeah, Killraven said that some people don't mind audio only because they just have it playing in the background anyway. So, yeah, maybe what I'll start doing is I'll put a couple of them up and see what kind of response they get. I'll some of the ones that I think would be stronger. That one for the 10 rules for running one shots. I think that would definitely be of value. Whether my advice or suggestions are good or not is another question, but that one likely would have more broader appeal. Brandon Paul, I backed the new Kickstarter. So hype. Brandon, do you mean the new Aberrant one? Because it's funny because I did initially. Partly because of the people who were involved with it. It's a lot of the people who were involved in the original edition, including Steve Kenson. And Steve Kenson, if you're not familiar with the name, he is the guy behind all of the Mutants Masterminds games. He's behind Icon. He's a really awesome and prolific designer, and he worked on Aberrant the first time too, so he's working on this new one. The reason I backed out is because it's actually a different mechanic. From what I understand, it's a different mechanic that is basically the same thing that was designed for Scion, for the newest edition of Scion. And my buddy Jared Rasher, who he writes for the Gnome Stew column, and he's got his own YouTube channel too, but he's not quite active on there. But Jared did a really good comprehensive. He writes an insane amount of reviews, and one of the things he reviewed was Scion, and he's a guy from the background for him. He loved 7th Sea, the second edition 7th Sea, which is a very narrative heavy kind of story type game, right? It's much more focused on the kind of narrative interventions that you do in like Fate or in some of the story games like Apocalypse World or Blades in the Dark or the Forge in the Dark games. He likes those games a lot more than I do. And he still found it to be a bit of a mishmash. So I was like, well, I'm going to wait till I see it come. I'm perfectly satisfied with this edition. But that said, I mean, Steve Kenson's got some pretty serious design chops behind him. So I may be having a little bit of remorse for having backed out of it. Maybe I need to get back on that. But yeah, and then Brandon, Mage is... I love Mage Mage the Ascension. Mage the Ascension is has been and remains one of my favorite games to think about. It's just been so long since I've got it back to the table, and I have often found it a challenge to get people to really grasp kind of what I'm trying to present with that particular game, So, and the rules I don't think do it any favors either. The rules mechanics for that are a bit... I'm not sure that the storyteller system, the original one, really has shown it or has aged particularly well. But anyway, that's it for chat. So thanks, guys. I guess the thing I'll close with is, again, I want to first off say another massive thank you and welcome to the new subscribers to the channel. I hope that you've been enjoying the content so far. I look forward to bringing you a bunch of fun new stuff in the time to come. If you want to engage with us more too, and again, for those who have sent me emails who I have not responded, I would strongly encourage you to join us on the Discord server that I'm finding to be... I was very resistant to set one up because I thought it was going to be monopolizing all my time and blah, 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 and I have not found that to be the case, and I found it to be a really terrific way of, a much more efficient way of interacting with all the players in the different games, and then also all collectively, and seeing players from different games and viewers as well, getting in touch with each other and talking about stuff, gaming related or otherwise. We had a lengthy, nostalgic, discussion of WoW Classic recently too, and why I can't join that because I need to have my day job. I will lose my job if I start playing WoW Classic. But that will be the way to interact with us further. And also, if you haven't heard back from me on your emails, I apologize. That's an easier way for me to go back and forth. And you can send me private messages on there too. So, there is that option. I want to say another big thank you as well to all the donors who have helped us reach our annual goal for the Heroes Save Villages campaign. Thank you so much, everybody. That just blows my mind that we've been able to raise so much money to help out some kids who really, really, really need help. That's just, my intention behind setting up the campaign in the first place was to have an opportunity for us to be doing something constructive and demonstrably positive with this goofy, pastime of ours. And I'm eternally grateful for everyone's generosity thus far. This has been phenomenal. If you have suggestions, again, on how I can better structure the rewards, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will be happy to chew that over. In addition, I want to say, as I normally say in my closing, a massive thank you to all my players. I again am... Any DM out there knows that not only is it hard to often get a group of players together, but also to get a solid group of players, and I'm blessed with a whole bunch of different groups of really, really amazing players. I have so much fun in all of the games that I run. I see such great role-playing and tactical play and interesting, high-level discussion with the players in our email correspondence, in our Discord, chat and everything. So it's just... I can't think of a time in my life, and I've been a lifelong gamer, where I've had such consistent, high-quality gaming experiences. I'm eternally grateful, and I'm so happy that we get to share this stuff with the viewers as well, too. It's been, someone asked me, what is it that I'm sort of trying to do with the channel? I mean, part of that is to be raising money for the charity as well, but that's not what I've always been doing with the channel. I've never been interested in kind of raising money for it, but what I do like is the idea of building community. I love people knowing that there's a place they can come, they can chat about games, they can play games, they can, whatever. So that's been, an incredible experience in 2019. I can't wait to continue on and for these last 4 months as well too, and finish the year strong with more great games, more great sessions, more great players, more great campaigns. So thank you guys. Without the players, DMs are nothing. We're guys sitting with giant stacks of books, dreaming up possibilities. So again, thank you so much. And thank you to the viewers again, too. This has been so much fun seeing more interaction with you folks, too. So it's been great. It's been terrific. I think that's it. I think that is the State of the Union. The State of the Union is strong. I am very much looking forward to the final stretch in 2019. I'm already starting to think about, the one thing I didn't talk about was the gaming marathon. So, and you know what? I think I won't. I want to end on a positive note. In the gaming marathon, I had a lot of fun, but I don't think I achieved what I wanted to do with the one-shot, which is to say, present a cohesive one story beginning to end that happened at the gaming marathon. But that said, we had something we didn't have happen in any other previous gaming marathon, which was this insanely tense moment where the players really looked like they were going to die due to some goofy stuff that was going on at the table. And their bacon was genuinely saved by a viewer who was also one of our regular players, George, who donated at the last second so the heroes could get their astonishing fortune stuff. They could re-roll some dice rolls, and they managed to slay this Hydra that was likely going to kill them. So, while I didn't achieve the one goal, I did get to have this really incredible, memorable moment with it. So that was pretty awesome. So I really can't complain about that. Anyway, it is Sunday night on a long weekend. My son has very patiently been waiting for me to go order pizza, so I should probably go do that. Thank you again to everybody who watches this, everyone who's joined in our community one way or the other, either posting, just watching, commenting on the videos, joining us in Discord, shooting me emails, finding me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Dungeon Musings. And you can shoot me an email. My email address is dungeonmusings@gmail.com. But again, nowadays the best way to sort of interact with me and the rest of the kind of the community is through the Discord server. So yeah. And again, I'll just end by mentioning that I won't go into the spiel, but there is a link to the Heroes Save Villages initiative in the description of this video. So if you are so inclined to toss any shekels in the direction of the channel, please feel free to click through and learn a little more about the Heroes Save Villages initiative and who that benefits, which is to say the kids that benefit from the SOS Children's Villages International Charity. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I look forward to making our way through this this third quarter, and until next time,